ADHD Rewired, episode 108. This is the show designed to help those of us who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and consultant. We know that starting can be the hardest part, so let's get started. But first, let me thank our sponsors. Support for this podcast comes from ADHD Rewired coaching and accountability groups. Save $400 on summer enrollment by registering before March 31st. Go to coachingrewired.com for details. That's coachingrewired.com and prepare to get your ADHD rewired. Wouldn't it be awesome to live a more organized life? To not spend hours playing the "where did I put my keys, wallet, phone, or car" game. Organizational strategies never came easy to me either, but I've learned a lot of them. There's a book that I've actually referred to as my organizational Bible. It's one of the first books I actually read when I was really determined to better manage my ADHD. The book is ADD-Friendly Ways to Organize Your Life by Kathleen Nadeau and Judith Kohlberg. And it's available on Audible. You can get this audiobook free or another like it by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Another book on organizing that has been suggested by a number of people in the ADHD Rewired community is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. I've never read it, but I've heard it's good. And if you're looking for some non-traditional methods to having a maintenance-free lawn for years to come, check out Tom Nardone's memoir about living with ADHD, Chasing Kites. Guys, this is truly an extraordinary book, and it will take you on an emotional journey. Pick up a copy at tomnardone.net or just go to ADHDrewired.com. This book is funny, it's sad, it's moving. Go pick it up. Unless you would just rather be chasing kites, in which case you should then go to tomnardone.net. All right, let's get on with the show. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. I am here in the virtual ADHD Rewired studios with my guest, Shelly Collins. Shelly is a professional organizer and almost podcaster and lots of other things, and she also has ADHD. So I'm not going to go into the details of that because her kind of background is part of her story. So Shelly, welcome to ADHD Rewired.
Thank you so much.
So let's start with, so you were just recently diagnosed.
Yes, I was actually in January of this year. So
okay. So yeah, this is still a freshly minted, shiny new diagnosis.
Sure is.
And now just a month or two ago is when we sort of met in the virtual space. You, I think, were in a podcasting group that I'm also in, and you reached out to me, and I think you also saw me present for the Institute for Chronic Disorganization doing a webinar.
Yes.
So that's how you kind of got familiar with me. You reached out to me about podcast. So Talk first about your recent diagnosis and then kind of what you're doing, because I think there's so much interesting kind of layers to your story and what you're doing that I'm looking forward to kind of unfolding this with you.
Yeah, so I started my organizing business in 2011, and at that time I considered myself to be a well-organized person, almost bordering on perfectionism. I was always the person in prior careers that was asked to help organize other people or develop processes in the office, that sort of thing. And I decided to turn that into a career. And in the organizing industry, we make a distinction between clients that are situationally disorganized. So people that are typically organized, but maybe I just had a baby or I got married or I had a job change or all three. And so life has kind of fallen apart and I just need somebody to get me back to where I was. And then there's chronic disorganization, and that includes us ADHDers. It is marked by disorganization that has been lifelong and can often impact career, relationships, and that sort of thing. So as my career in organizing progressed, I realized that I really loved working with chronically disorganized clients. They're wonderful people, and I decided to deepen my education on chronic disorganization. So that included a lot of education on ADHD. I began taking training for ADHD coaching. And at the same time, I was getting involved with the Institute for Challenging Disorganization, and I attended their conference in 2014. At that conference, I was sitting in Dr. Barkley's session, and it was the first time that I really, truly understood what ADHD is, because that was what his presentation was, is 3 hours on this is what ADHD is.
Mm-hmm. And for anyone that doesn't know, if anyone's new to the podcast or new to ADHD, Dr. Russell Barkley is really considered like the world's like authority on ADHD. He'll self-describe himself as once he starts talking, he opens up the floodgates, and he has two sets of lungs. One is for talking, and the other one is for taking a breath in between thoughts. So
that sounds accurate. So at the time that I was sitting in his session, I had completed about half of my ADHD coach training, and I had already suspected that, hey, this sounds a lot like me. But as I'm sitting in that session, I'm like, wow, this really sounds like me. This sounds like the struggles that I've had. This sounds like the challenges that I've had.
Do you remember any of the specifics of like what he was saying that you're like, oh man, oh yes, check. Like, do you remember any of the specifics of it?
Oh, that's a good question. Gosh, it's so hard to separate now because I've studied ADHD from both sides, right? Like for my clients and for myself. But for me, I think that, it's always been when my systems aren't there, I'm at a loss. Like, for example, my husband and I moved in 2013. So I'm sitting in this session and we had just moved. And so all of the routines and habits and everything that I had built up in my old house to kind of keep me going were gone. And I was a hot mess. My house was a mess. My business was a mess. My life was a mess. I was a mess, and it was because all of those supportive habits and routines that I had built for myself went away with the new house, right? It was a brand new space that needs a different kind of maintenance. Everything's in a different place. And so I just couldn't even figure out how to start getting that back. And that's the place I was in, sitting in that session, hearing about the struggles of someone with ADHD. I was thinking, how am I sitting here as a professional organizer and my house looks like a bomb went off in it, right?
What was the emotional impact of that like for you sitting in there?
It was hard. I think for a long time I thought being a professional organizer meant, I have to have my stuff together at all times and I have to present this very put together persona. And I've come to realize that's not only not true, my clients really appreciate when I can connect with them on a personal level and let them know that what they're going through is common. It is normal. They're not alone. Many people have the struggles, including me. So I think my clients like it now that I will kind of show them my mess and share my story with them too. And I think it has really gone a long way towards creating like a deeper relationship and more lasting results with my clients. It's pretty cool, but it was definitely scary and hard at the time. And that's why I didn't get diagnosed for another 1.5 years after that.
Because if we don't really address it, it's not actually an issue.
Right. I just thought, well, that could be, but I'll be okay. Like I figured it out before, I'll figure it out again. Right. So
you said earlier that, some of your systems would kind of verge on perfectionism.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. I am a recovering perfectionist. When my husband and I got married, we lived in this little 1,000-square-foot house that I could scrub top to bottom once a week and have it just be pristine. So that was my routine. On Mondays, I would clean the house top to bottom and have it be pristine. Everything had to be just so. And I really get visually bothered when things are out of place. Now we live in a 3,000-square-foot house, and I have 2 more businesses than I had when we got married. So, I've had to let some of that go. And I think on top of that, my organizing clients have taught me to let that go, because when I was a brand new organizer, what's that?
How so?
Well, when I was a brand new organizer, we would get to a certain point in the project, the point where the systems were there. Maybe they weren't pretty. Maybe the labels were handwritten. Maybe the containers didn't match. We were just using what we had. And I would want to then finalize it. Like, okay, now let's take it to the real simple level of being beautiful. And most of my clients would be like, really, it's fine. I'm done. Like, I got what I needed. This is good. And that used to bother me. Like, we're not done yet. Well, can't you see that we need to keep going? And I found that I was getting a lot of pushback from clients. I'm done.
Well, they're like, really, this is good. This is helpful. Like,
yes,
please
exactly.
stop.
We're good. I can stop now. And so, I started to realize that perfectionism isn't what my clients wanted. They just wanted what they needed and nothing more.
Yeah.
So
you're working with clients. They're kind of giving you that pushback. So you've created maybe the system for where they put their papers, and it's working for them. And like, but the brother label maker would make this look so much better, and they were like, "This is good. We're fine."
Or matching file folders. Like, we've got these old ugly file folders in 10 colors. Can we pick out some new ones? And they're like, I really don't care.
And just so everyone knows, the expression on your face when you're like, the matching file folders, it was almost like this guilty pleasure of like, you got to have the matching file folders.
You do, or I do, but something that I've learned is that's my modality preference. I'm very visually hypersensitive. So if things don't match, that bothers me. And I do sometimes have clients that have that same preference, and I have other clients that just don't even see it and don't want to spend the time on it.
So I have to imagine when you're working with a client who really likes that, you're like having a field day.
Oh yeah, it's a good time.
So, it's interesting is I think sometimes, and you were kind of touching on this earlier, that there's when you're first sort of getting into the arena of looking for help with ADHD, and you hear that the professional has ADHD, there's this thought of how could they help, like if they have ADHD themselves. And I've heard so many people say like they don't want to work with someone on their ADHD that doesn't have ADHD. I'm wondering, do you think that there's the same kind of thought process in the general public for those who kind of at least have a general understanding of what professional organizing is when it comes to professional organizing? Because I think my immediate thought was like, okay, like a therapist I get, but a professional organizer, you really got to have your stuff together to do that, right? So talk to me a little bit about that and how you see your ADHD kind of impacting your work, and what you do, how you run your business is. You've more than one business. So talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah. So I do think that people have a certain expectation when they first call an organizer, but I think they're afraid of the person in their head, right? They're afraid of this very type A person who's going to tell them why everything they're doing is wrong and what a mess they are. So I found the more that I'm myself in my business, the better it's been. Like, when I let people know, what you're going through is real. I've experienced it too. Let me give you some examples, and here's what I've done. They connect with that, and it's almost like a relief. Like, okay, I'm not so far gone. Even the organizer has challenges, right? So it's really given me a platform to like normalize that for my clients, and also to help encourage them when they're in a place of stuckness, or I can't do it, or why can everyone else do it and I can't, right? Well, everyone has these struggles to some degree. And I'm actually in a really interesting place in my business now. I closed my solo practice and I work with partners now.
And I say you closed your solo practice, your organizing practice.
Correct.
Okay. And
I am now working with 2 partners under an umbrella, which is wonderful. And we actually trade hours with each other. And I tell clients that, like us as organizers, we use each other for support too, so it's something that can benefit anyone, and it's something that we all need. So I do think that it gives me just another opportunity to be more real with people. And I do think that sometimes it will blow people's minds up front, but it's not really about me. It's not about my ability to organize or how I would organize the space. It's all about the client and what their needs are and what their preferences are, which is why I took that coach training, because bringing in the coaching piece allows us to do that sort of deeper work. As far as,
so now, are you a certified coach? Is that?
I'm not a certified coach yet. I'm working on the certified organizer coach credential, which is through the ICF.
Hmm.
And my training is through Coach Approach for Organizers, which is ICF accredited. So it's been a really wonderful and transformative journey all the way around. And I really think that it has had a big impact on my client results. Um, and then you asked specifically about how do clients feel about an ADHD or helping another ADHDer. I recently put up a blog post on our website about getting diagnosed with ADHD. And a couple of days later, I had a coaching call with a client who I've done both hands on organizing work with and coaching work with. She's someone with ADHD. And the first thing out of her mouth is, "Do you really think you can help me if you have ADHD?" And I'm like, whoa, where is this coming from? Well, she had read my blog post, right? But the cool thing was is it led to like a new conversation with her, because previously she had kind of been saying, well, ADHD is what it is. I just need to get organized. And it gave her a new perspective that maybe I need to address this organizing challenge I'm having in the context of ADHD instead of in spite of ADHD. So it was a huge perspective shift for her.
So how do you do that?
How do I do what?
Address the organizing challenges in the context of their ADHD.
Oh, I love that question. That's where the coaching comes in. So it's really helping my clients see, how does ADHD show up for you? It's different for everyone. Everyone has different language around it. I especially love the different language I get around hyperfocus, right? I'm in the zone, or, everyone has their sort of special pet name for that without realizing it's hyperfocus. So helping them to see how ADHD shows up, which helps us look at what types of systems do we need here? What could possibly work? Because for people who have struggles with hyperfocus, sometimes the problem is hyperfocusing on the wrong thing, or hyperfocusing to the detriment of not getting other things done. And then when you're inattentive, it's that, that being stuck and not being able to engage. And both things, have an impact on systems that work. And an example that I can give is I have a coaching client who he's a developer, and he had this big problem where when he hit a skill gap in his work, he would just stop, and he couldn't keep going, right? This was a time management client. And we discovered that for big projects, mapping it out before he started was a huge boost to his ability to be productive and get it done start to finish. And he came to a new awareness that doing that when he had a skill gap produced the same result. So for him, it was about stopping, getting out of hyperfocus long enough to create some new awareness, to get out the notebook, to map out what needed to happen next so that he could re-engage in a way that actually was productive. And it was a light bulb moment for him. And now I think he's carrying around like something like 5 or 6 notebooks for the different areas of his life, because that's what he does for everything now. And it's working. And that's very specific. It's very, it's something that's very specific to that client. He's somebody that likes to write. He likes the tactile. He likes to draw out things. He likes to sketch out, even being a graphic designer, he likes to sketch things on paper first. So that's so super specific to who he is, but it's a system that ended up working really well and continues to work. So that's the type of thing that I do with my clients. It's about finding those things, the things that will work with who you are, how ADHD shows up for you.
I like that a lot. Today, actually, in one of my group coaching calls, we had this conversation come up. We were talking about knowledge gaps and the hunger for kind of the constant learning. A lot of people with ADHD I find are like voracious learners. And what was really interesting, and it certainly gave me pause, was one of the people in my group said, I think that part of that kind of voracious learning is an effort to kind of mask the shame of feeling inadequate about something. And I thought that was kind of spot on in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Wow. I can't even add to that. That's just such a great statement. And I know as someone with ADHD, I certainly feel that a lot in my own business.
Yes. I mean, this is the year where I'm really trying to grow my business and bring on on other people, and even even the realm of like virtual assistants to delegate some of those other kind of not content creation tasks, but other other tasks. And what I've recognized in myself is like delegating is hard because it requires organizing your thoughts enough to be able to communicate it in an effective way.
Yes, yes. I'm going through much of the same having two partners. We're equal partners in this venture and we all have our own responsibilities. And sometimes it's like, oh, I'll just do it rather than trying to explain to somebody else how to do it. And it's really been a different world to let go of that solo entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
total control, do it my way, and have to, work in a group and work with other decision makers. Because in my business, I'm also not the sole decision maker anymore. I don't have the autonomy anymore. And that can be a challenge sometimes.
So, how do three professional organizers who are in this business together organize information around your own business?
Great question. We have several different systems that we use. So, our daily communication tool is Slack, which is
Do you like Slack?
I do and I don't. We have all set Slack up so that it only gives you a desktop notification if somebody ats you or pings you.
Will you explain a little bit what Slack? I'm in my own mastermind group with some other podcasters, and they use Slack, and so we kind of post our weekly goals and stuff in there. I'm having a hard time getting into Slack. So can you just explain what it is and how you're using it?
Sure. So Slack is a chat tool for work teams, typically for remote work teams, although there are offices that use it too. And you can organize your conversations into different channels so that you can search back later if you need to on a specific topic. So for our organizing business, we have a general, which is just, kind of here and there. We have an urgent for things that, hey, I need you to look at this like within the next 24 hours or less. We have a marketing channel to discuss like long-term, hey, I saw this great idea and I just want to plop it here so we don't forget about it. Does anybody have any thoughts kind of thing? And then we have a random channel for when we get off on like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? You want to go shopping? That sort of thing. So you can organize your conversation into channels and you can actually group the different people into different channels. So we're in all the channels because there's only 3 of us. But if you had like a 10-person team and only 5 people need to see this one channel, or in my tech startup, I do not subscribe to the development channel because I don't understand 95% of the coding talk that's going on. So I don't need those notifications. That's the intent. And we use it for our day-to-day communication. So we don't use email for internal communication at all. Everything goes through Slack, and that's kind of our role. And that allows us to respond to each other more in real time. So if I'm walking out of a client appointment that was on site, I can pull out my phone. I can look at Slack really quick. If there's something I need to answer right away, I can answer it. If I want to look back at it later, I can star it. And that's been really, really nice for us because we're an email heavy business with our clients. So taking the internal stuff out of email and putting it in a different channel has been pretty useful for us overall. In addition to that, we use Asana, which is a project management tool. So that's where we keep all of our projects that we're working on within the business. And then we use Google Apps and
talk about Asana a bit. What does that do?
Okay, so Asana is a project management tool for teams. So we're all able to see the different projects. We're able to add tasks for one another. We're able to add projects for one another. So if I need my partner to do X, I don't even have to call her or Slack her, email her. I just put it in Asana with a due date. And then if she has any additional questions, she can get at me via Slack to ask about it.
What are some of the things you like about Asana?
It's really visually simple. So a lot of project management tools, especially traditional project management tools, get really, really complicated. And for a 3-person team, we just don't need that level of complexity. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy to navigate. It's really, really easy to organize, which we like as organizers. It integrates with some other things. So we actually have Asana integrated with Slack. Anytime a new task is added to Asana, a chat message gets sent to Slack. So there's that sort of double layer of, hey, somebody assigned you something, just so you know. And it it works nicely in the Google Apps environment, which is what we use. So we use Gmail and Google Calendar, and we're able to use our Google login to work with Asana as well. It has a mobile app, so we can take it on the go. So for a team working remotely as we are, it's just a really nice way for us to sort of organize around the bigger picture things that we're doing. And that's what we use it for, is the big picture stuff.
Now, can you put like different like multimedia things within Asana? Like if you have a link to a video or even a picture itself, like can you do that in Asana?
You can attach files.
Mm-hmm.
We typically don't, but you can.
Okay.
Any other multimedia could go through Slack if you wanted somebody to watch a video. If you post a YouTube link in Slack, the video will actually be available to watch right within Slack.
Nice.
Photographs and that sort of thing too. So we kind of use them in tandem. Slack is our real time, right now, one-off question type place, and Asana is our long-term or recurring. So our recurring marketing tasks are all assigned to just as they're done, they recur. So the blog posts that we're all supposed to write and that sort of thing recur on a set time.
And for anyone listening who's like thinking about, oh, would this be a good tool for me? What's the learning curve on it? And so first, what's the learning curve on Asana?
I would say it's fairly easy. Between three partners, I would say two of us are tech savvy and one of us is less so. I won't name names. Sorry, partner that's not tech savvy. We love you. But even she was able to onboard really quickly. I've actually showed it to some clients. I do a lot of business organizing these days. That's actually my wheelhouse within our new company, is working with small business owners and also working with small work teams. And I have showed it more than once, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on how it works, even with people who aren't familiar with using anything more than, say, like an Outlook. So it really, really is intuitively set up. And that's what I look for when I'm looking at a piece of software, is can I just click around and figure out how to use it? Because if not, I'm out. I'm checking out.
So I know I've worked with clients who want to develop these like really complex systems. And then I'll ask, well, let me see where to kind of, how are you using your to-do list? And then I get that blank stare of like, my to-do list? This is why I want this tool. I'm like, are you in agreement with the whole notion? Like, you got to start with the basics.
Yes, absolutely.
List,
absolutely.
Don't touch Asana.
Absolutely. With clients who already halfway have a system. So if I have a client that's using a paper system that sort of works, I will typically approach it from, let's refine the paper system and let's build the habits. And then if you want to make a change and start building on that and look toward moving to an electronic calendar, moving to an electronic to-do list, that's fine. But the habits are more important than the tool. And the tool only works if you
say that one more time, because I think that's so important that point was not brushed over.
Okay. The habits are more important than the tool.
And to even break that down more, the behavior is more important than the tool. I always talk about that habits are kind of the sweet success of a repeated behavior.
Yes.
Right? So we all want habits because there's sort of this unconscious like notion that a habit is not as effortful. So we really want the habit, but don't focus on the habit. Focus on what do you got to do today. Repeat that tomorrow. Keep repeating that. Over time, that becomes habit.
Yes, exactly. And I find with so many organizing clients, they come kind of hoping that I'm going to have the magic tool or the magic container or the magic app that's going to do it for them. And so a lot of what I do up front with people is managing expectations and sort of bringing them down to, hey, this isn't going to be easy. It's not going to be short term, but if you stick with it and stick with me, we will get there. You will get where you want to go. But without the behaviors, without the habits, there is no magic bullet tool.
And how do you help prospective clients hear that message? Because you and I both know that, and you and I both have worked with clients who, they want the drastic change, and they don't want to hear this kind of foo-foo stuff about, we just got to change our expectations. And, and then as they really do their work and they really realize that, because, I think good coaching and good therapy and organizing part of the process is to help them do the work and help them learn how to engage in the feedback of what's working and what's not working. And so I just see it so frequently, and to me it's sort of like magical and awe inspiring when you see that shift of, oh, my expectations about this were not even anywhere near realistic, and you see that them being okay with this now. To me, that's I think it's just gold. How do you help clients, or do you even address it in the beginning? Because people people are already feeling, they're coming to us because they need help, right?
Right.
And so they're feeling like, I need the solutions. And when you are telling them, well, part of the solution is you got to kind of do less and take some off your plate, like, that's not what I want to hear. I want you to tell me how to do more with less time, right?
Right. And no, I absolutely address it up front because, I don't want to work with somebody who I can't get to at least a reasonable level of expectation, because I'm going to show up and we're going to do our 3-hour session and they're going to say, well, it's not done, or why aren't we farther? Or, just, they're going to expect that we're going to fix everything in one 3-hour session. And that's just, and I've had that happen, by the way, once or twice in 5 years, where I thought that the person I was speaking with on the phone had reasonable expectations and then showed up and found out they didn't. And I actually stopped the session and said, I'm not going to charge you, and left, because I just don't feel good about working with someone if I can't get them to a place where they see what it's really going to take. As far as how I do it, one, I ask a lot of questions, about the situation, and I ask what kind of timeline.
So imagine I called you. Okay, I like to get really specific here.
Okay.
So imagine I called you and I'm like, Shelly, I am struggling here. I have this really, really bad allergy to paperwork. I break out in piles and procrastination. Can you help me?
Well, yeah, I can help you.
How?
Tell me a little bit more about what's going on.
Well, some of the issues that I have with paperwork, besides from just hating all of it, and I don't even have that much paperwork that I do. I have when I have a new client that I'm working with in my therapy practice, not my coaching practice, it's my therapy practice. My client brings in the new client paperwork, and I have to get like 3 pages of that stack to my biller, and I will put this off. And the whole task takes maybe 5 minutes, right? But the things I need to do is I need to actually create a file folder. Now, I do like my brother label maker because I can barely read my own writing. So for me, that is part of my process, but I'll batch it. So if I have a couple new clients, I'll do it all together. But I find myself waiting till like the last day of the billing cycle. And then it's urgent. And I've just had a really hard time getting myself to do that kind of, right when I'm seeing that client. So I'm not putting it off, and the in basket grows and grows. Because under that in basket in those new client files piles are things like mail that I don't even see anymore because the size of the envelope is smaller than my file folder, and sometimes in those envelopes is money, or something that's requiring an urgent response. So that's those are my kind of pain points, and I hate paperwork. I mean, it's truly I passionately hate it.
Okay, so I'm hearing a couple of different things here. To start, it sounds like we're having some challenges with habits. So the habit that you want to have is completing a new client packet as soon as you receive it. But right now, what's happening is it's piling up and becoming something that happens frantically at the last minute, if at all. And because of that, then we have this whole other set of important papers that isn't even being touched. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, and I think when it's why reflection is such a great tool, because when you said what I hear you saying is that there's one issue of habit, my light bulb is kind of when I'm like, yeah, it's like if I just focus on the specific small behaviors, like because this month actually I had a new client, and or last week I had a new client, and like right when they left, I did that. I'm like, well, that felt good, and that wasn't so hard. And so when he said that, I was like, yeah, like that's what I need to focus on, because I think the other than issue is that I have the later box, right? And I always tell my clients that later doesn't exist on the calendar. Assign a date and time to later, right? So I put the files in the later box, and I hate opening mail. That's another thing that I hate. Like, I wish my mail came pre-opened.
You and every one of my clients. That's why I'm laughing. It's such a common challenge with mail. So if we were going to continue this conversation, I would begin to talk to you about what we would do with that mail. And so step one is we have to clear the backlog, right? So we would sit together and we would take the pile of mail and we would start to categorize it. So piece by piece, and I've done this with hundreds of clients, we would sit, we would open, we would sort into categories. And that's all we're going to do is just get it into some sort of category. So is it a bill? Is it something that needs to be done? Is it something that needs to be filed? Is it information or something that just needs to be read, something that you need to be aware of? There might be some additional categories depending upon who you are and what types of paper you have coming in. I have a client that gets invited to a lot of events, for example. So events are a separate category for her. And then we would look at each pile and start to talk about how can we set up an action system based on the categories that we have here.
You know, the first category you mentioned was bills. So keeping that in mind, I got to pay the bills, and we do that by taking a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll be right back, and you're going to help us with these categories and how to deal with all this pesky damn paperwork. We'll be right back. Have you ever read the book E-Myth? In this classic book for entrepreneurs, Michael Gerber says that most business owners don't really own a business, they own a job. The solution he offers has to do with systems. It became very clear to me this year that I own my job. And if I'm going to grow, I need to change some of the ways that I operate. And as I begin the process of building a team to pick up where my strengths leave off, I knew I needed to get greater clarity over my business financials. I also know that I've said that before and hadn't really done much about it. Because honestly, it makes my head spin and I find it difficult. But as a driven person, I knew I couldn't just try harder. So I hired a coach. And so did Andrew Acre. More specifically, he joined the ADHD Rewired Coaching and Accountability Group. Andrew Acre is an ADHD coach and an entrepreneur who is really interested in growing his coaching practice. Each week, Andrew and I have been talking about how the group has been going, the progress he is making, what he's struggling with. This was a conversation that we had a week before group started. I asked Andrew why he joined the group.
And I want to use the group as like a period of time where I'm going to the group with a couple things. I want to use this group to work on my vision for my business. There's structure provided by the group. I can kind of go in every week and say, well, I'm thinking about this, kind of make myself think about, well, what's a goal that I can set with that, and sort of then come back. So it's sort of a structured period of time where I'm working on my vision for my business, which I haven't done in any structured way up to this point.
Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we meet in a Zoom video conference room where we discuss our weekly goals, strategies, talk about systems, solutions, and we try to find out what's working, what's not. As an entrepreneur, one of the best things and most challenging things is that how we spend our time is up to us. And that's another reason that Andrew shared about why he joined this group.
My daily self-management ability and productivity and time management and organization, all of which I'm responsible for as an entrepreneur. The only structure that exists in my business is the times that I see clients. Everything else is on my schedule. Everything else is on my own infinite, unlimited schedule.
But you don't need to do it alone. Make this the summer you get your ADHD rewired. Be one of the first to register for this summer's session. Want to save $400? Register before March 31st and you can. If you are one of the first 6 people to register, You can join this group for less than $167 a month. To learn more, go to coachingrewired.com and schedule your free screening today. The next session begins May 23rd. Join us 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. Central Time, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Go to coachingrewired.com for more information. That's coachingrewired.com, and prepare to get your ADHD rewired. All right, we are back, and I just have to share with you. I think it's kind of funny that Shelly and I were just talking during the break about this whole idea of I have my guest for like an hour, so if something's going to help me, I'm going to ask specifically, and it helps others. And Shelly responded by saying, "Well, yeah, it's great. It's role play. It's fun." And I said to her, "Role play? Like I'm being serious here about my paperwork. Like you're really helping me right now." And so let's keep doing this. So we are going through the mail, right? We've created all these different categories. All right, what's next?
Okay, so if I was sitting with you, we would have opened each piece of mail, and I typically just use a sticky note, right? Stick a sticky note on the top of the pile, and we have bills, and we have maybe just action for now, and we have information, and then we have papers that need to be filed. Mm-hmm. The next step would be to look at each pile. So bills are pretty self-explanatory. They need to be paid. That's what needs to happen. But for some people, the action pile can be really overwhelming. And just having a folder that says to do or action can feel too broad, maybe. Mm-hmm. So for some people, it stops there. And we just have to pay, to do, to file, maybe future and pending or waiting on response. But for some people, that action needs to become some distinct categories. And for some clients, it has worked to do it by type of action. So calls to make, emails to send, RSVPs, just general things like that. For other clients, it has worked to do it by due date. So setting up the traditional 1 to 31 tickler file and just filing things when you want them to be done.
And then how do you get clients to actually do that? Because, I use the framework of, I call it the trip model of you need to have your timers, you need to have your reminders, you need to have your inputs. And so I look at that as it's an input. It's where you capture something and then you need to process it. How do you get your clients to process the tickler file?
So the purpose of a tickler file is, since you have 31 folders, you're supposed to check it every single day. That just becomes part of your daily routine. Is you look in that day, and whatever is in that day, you either do, which is the ideal situation, or if you need to push it back, you put it in the next day that you're going to work on it.
So let me apply this as if this were myself and you were suggesting the tickler file, right? So here's the problem that I would have with that, because I have days where I'm rocking it, and I have days where I will stare at that whole system and I'm not even sure what to do with it. So I could see myself like it being a system that requires almost too much consistency. How would you address that?
I would tell you that maybe a tickler file isn't right for you. Tickler files work really well for my clients who respond well to deadline pressure. So I put this in on the 29th. I'm doing it on the 29th because I put it in on the 29th, and that's my deadline. Mm-hmm. Other clients don't respond so well to that. So perhaps you would be better off with a category-based system. With category-based systems, I like to tell my clients, first of all, forget the touch it once paper rule. I know everyone has heard this rule, touch it once and just get it done. No, that's bad. Throw it out. It's a terrible rule. It gives people lots of paper anxiety. Mm-hmm. Instead,
because I know I often will pick something up and have this thought of, I don't know what to do with this right now. Like my brain just won't give me that information. Like maybe tomorrow I'll pick it up and I'll know exactly what to do with it. But so I appreciate you saying that, because I think in theory it makes sense. But if we are being kind of self-compassionate and honoring and understanding the ADHD brain, like that's not realistic on a day-to-day basis.
It's not. And so I like to instead say, every time you touch a piece of paper, move it forward. So let me walk you through what that looks like.
Okay.
And let's say you're a client that has one of my extreme cases of just terrible time dealing with mail, which it sounds like you very well might be.
Hate it.
So for you, just checking the mail and putting it into a designated little paper tray on your desk might be step one. Congratulations, you've moved it forward. You got it out of the mailbox. Yay. Step two might then be opening the mail and just putting it into your action folders. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to do it right now. You just have to decide what it is. And you are making decisions at that point because you're deciding, am I going to do it? Because you don't want to put it in your action folder if you're not going to do it. So by virtue of putting it into your action system, you've now made a decision. This is something that I will do. And then step three would be opening up your action folder, whether that's once a week, twice a week, and taking the next step on each piece of paper within.
Do you suggest clear action folders?
I think it depends. I think it depends on who you are. I always like a system that sits on the desktop.
Mm-hmm.
I've done them with racks and manila folders so that you can just pull your manila folder down and pop it open and work on it and then scoop it back up and put it away when you're done. I've also done it with like a desktop hanging file and hanging folders.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that both can work really well. Clear folders would make me crazy because of my visual hypersensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to see, I do practice what I preach. Let's see if I can give you a little, see all those pink and purple folders? Those are my action folders.
That's really pretty. And you have like color coordinating little cube, square, box like shelf thing there.
Yeah, those are all my tiny little organizing supplies like Post-its and label tape and that sort of thing. But yeah, this right here is my action.
So you have
folder.
like the staircase kind of a style of what do you call it? File, like a desktop file.
Yeah,
so
like a desktop file box. And I have a set for my personal life and a set for my business because I run both out of this same office.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when I'm working on something, I will pull one folder down and I will open it up and work through as much as I can in the time that I have, and then I'll put it away again. So when I go to pay the bills, I pull the bill folder down, I pay all the bills, and I put the bill folder back. With your action folder, pull it down and get as far as you can. Now, the challenge with the action folder, especially for ADHDers, is you'll flip through every piece of paper and mentally note what it is you need to do. Oh, I need to make a phone call. Oh, I need to send this. Check. Oh, I need to send this email. Oh, I need to look this product up that I might want to buy. Mm-hmm. And then by the time you've done that, you're so exhausted, you close the folder and put it away and you haven't done anything. So the key is to open it up and take the next step.
All right, so let me ask you this. What about the piece of paper that you get that, and this could maybe even be an email too, where like, this is important, but you just don't know what to do with it right now. What do you do with that?
Well, it should go in your action system. So if you're not going to deal with it right now, but you know it needs to be done.
But what if it's, you don't even know if it's an action, you don't know if is this reference, is this nice to know, is this something I want to, like your brain is not telling you what needs to be done with this piece of paper. Like your brain is just like, you see it's paper, there's words on it. But what you're supposed to do with it, you're just like, I don't know. What do you do with that?
Do you have a specific example from your own life? It sounds like this is something that happens to you. So do you have any example?
I get a mailing for like a professional development.
Okay.
So go ahead.
So again, you're facing a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at the piece of paper and you're like, I don't know. That's indecision. That's you saying, I don't know whether I want to do this professional development thing or not. And that happens a lot with events, by the way. With my business owner clients, that's probably the number one paper challenge is all the different possible events and professional development things. So now you're at the point of decision. Do I put this in my action folder and register for this professional development, or do I throw it in the recycle bin? Right? It's just a matter of making the decision.
I'll tell you what I did with this specific thing that I'm thinking about. So there's it's actually like 2 weeks from now. And it looked really interesting. And I saw like there's a potential conflict in my calendar, But so what I did is I put all the information from it in my calendar, and then set a alarm to go off 2 weeks before that event, reminding me I need to decide on that event.
Perfect.
So that's what I did with that piece of information. But sometimes I'll throw it up on the bulletin board. Like I'm actually looking up. I'm looking at the bulletin board right now, and I'm looking at right now I'm taking Brene Brown's Living Brave semester, right? So it's funny because on my bulletin board, that's a reminder to myself of, do I want to take this or not? Because I got that many, many, many months ago. But I don't need that anymore. Hang on. I'm going to take that down right now while we're thinking about it. I feel so much better now.
It's down.
Yeah. I don't need this anymore.
But do you see
now
where...
I'm looking for my garbage can. Because that almost became another task. Of like, okay, I don't know where my garbage can is. I'll just put it on my desk and deal with it later.
Okay, I have a recycle bin right under my desk for that reason, so that when I open the mail, I can just chuck the paper that I don't need. My shredder is right behind me, so that if it needs to be shredded, I can do it right then. But do you see where you kind of had two different ways of processing the same information? One ended up on your bulletin board. One ended up in your calendar. There's no wrong way. It's doing it consistently one way. Right. So I like your notion of, if you're not 100% sure, stick it on your calendar and set a reminder before the deadline to make a decision. I think that's a great way to handle indecision based on, I don't know what my calendar is going to look like. And as a as an entrepreneur, I'm not a solo entrepreneur anymore, but as an entrepreneur, I can understand you can't always predict that far out what your calendar is going to look like. But having a process for deciding and remembering to decide, because the challenge with many of my clients is they accumulate all of those event invites, but they never go through them again. So then when we sit down and go through them together, we're tossing out 25 pieces of paper for events that have already passed. So
I have so many catalogs of like professional like books, those like, oh, I'm going to look at this one day. Oh, I'm definitely going to order this one. And every once in a while I'll look at this and be like, okay, this was from 4 years ago. And I'm like, I just need to throw it away. So I know for myself, I'm not a hoarder, but I certainly have hoarding tendencies. Because I think part of it is the I might need this. And as soon as I catch myself like thinking that, I'm like, okay, really? And it was when I have that piece of information, whether it's a piece of paper, something, if I can under a minute take a couple pictures of it and throw it in Evernote, then I have that. So the idea of I might need it, fine. It's digitally saved. I throw it away. That works for me.
Yeah, that is a challenge with people is, fear of losing information. Mm-hmm. So I always like to ask, what is the worst thing that would happen? I'm usually holding the piece of paper in my hand when I say this. What is the worst thing that would happen if I dump this piece of paper in the shredder right now? Most people go, oh, nothing. Nothing bad would happen. So by all means, let's let it go. So that's one way that you can kind of could you get this information again? What's the worst thing that would happen if you got rid of this piece of paper? And is this information available to you again if you should need it?
Yeah.
Because it sounds to me like you may then be digitally hoarding a little bit inside of Evernote. Maybe.
Is there a problem with that?
Well, it depends. Are you using that information? Or is it just going there to give you peace of mind?
Well, for me, I look at Evernote as it's the piles of crap, but searchable like Google. So, like, why is it a problem then?
If you're utilizing it, it's not. I run into the challenge of clients who will take the time to digitize information and then not utilize it. They're literally digitizing information that they don't need or that they could get just via Google or another way, and they will go get another way rather than going to Evernote and doing a search there. So it depends is the answer. It isn't a bad use of Evernote, but it's about, are you saving things you really need, or are you saving things because you're uncomfortable letting it go even though you don't need it?
No, for me, it's more of I think the things that they might want to access, or the notes that I took about something that's sort of random, but Well, I'll take the time to tag it though, so it's easy to search. And one of the things I love about Evernote, at least in the premium version, that it can search your handwriting. And I write like a second grader, and I can typically find my handwriting. So, I mean, not to say that, I mean, a second grader with below average handwriting, I might add. So, to me, that's a valuable tool versus having, like, I'll have a bunch of sticky notes that have relevant information on my desk, and then that starts to drive me nuts. So I'll just snap the picture of it, throw it into Evernote. And I love how Evernote kind of captures, it knows it's a sticky note, and I love it for that.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you're using Evernote the way that it's intended, which is great. Like I said, the challenge becomes people who digitize and then aren't utilizing the information that's digitized to recreate file folders. I had a client that saved articles from his industry magazine, and he had 20 years worth. And he legitimately wanted to go through 20 years worth and organize it and put it into a filing system. And it took a lot of coaching and a lot of conversation for him to realize half of this information was probably woefully outdated. And what was left, he could get another way, you know, so we reduced it down to the stuff that he really, really wanted to access. And because of that, it was actually accessible, right? Because he didn't have 20 years worth of papers to go through to get to the 5 that were actually useful.
So when you said that, what came to mind for me is I was in my basement this morning looking for something, and I have about maybe 4 or 5 boxes of college coursework. Shelly, what do I do with this stuff?
When was the last time you looked at it?
When I moved.
How long ago was that?
6 or 7 years ago.
Okay, so
but there is something that's so like satisfying about a little bit of reminiscing. Where do you draw the line between, okay, like, so if the next time I look at this stuff is when I move again, and that like reminiscing provides some value for me? Where's the cutoff? Because if you can't think about that for everything, right?
Right.
Because that's hoarding, right?
Could be starting to go that direction, yes, if everything has sentimental value. So for something like that, there's a couple of different things you could do. One, you fully admit that the only reason you looked at it in the last 6 or 7 years was because you moved, which forced you to touch the stuff and remember that it existed. Mm-hmm. But you still have some sentimental attachment to it. So,
and I think emotional attachment too. You know, as someone with ADHD that was diagnosed in college, getting through college, getting through grad school, like, those were Herculean feats. You know what I mean? So there's that, like, I did this.
And these boxes of work represent what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So in a case like yours, I might suggest what I like to call the partway gone box. Maybe you sift through those boxes and pick out a couple of the most important things that you know you want to keep forever. And you put everything else in a box and label it 1 year from that date. And if in a year you haven't looked in there again, maybe it's okay to let it go.
That makes sense. Because there's really no need to keep the syllabus anymore, right?
Right. Well, and it gives you, that sense of, okay, I'm not throwing it out right now today. You know, it gives you a little bit of comfort of, if I want to go back to it, I can. And then in 6 months or a year, you can evaluate, okay, I didn't look at this at all in the last year. Now can I let it go? That can be a really big help with emotional barriers when it comes to stuff, is that partway gone. Okay, you don't have to throw it out right now.
Throwing stuff away too, I know it always helps to be with someone else and let them be the one that touches it, handles it, and throws it away. Because as soon as we touch it, we are now so more emotionally connected to that piece of whatever it is.
Yes, that's especially true for people with that tactile modality strength, mm-hmm. right? With clothes, clients thought, but this sweater is so soft. Well, you just told me 2 seconds ago that you didn't like the way that it looks on you, but it's so soft. So you're right. Sometimes it's about having someone else physically touch it, or sometimes it's about just having somebody that's not emotionally attached to the items, helping you make distinctions between what is really important mm-hmm. and what's important to your long-term goals. So if your long-term goal is to have a basement that is beautifully organized and to live more minimally, then how can we align your 5 boxes of college work with those goals?
Shelly, beautifully organized basement is not what I've set my expectations to be more realistic. I'm just looking for it to be safe to walk down there, and to maybe do a couple things down there. But yeah, I'm okay with that though.
You're okay with that, but that would be your goal, and so we would be making decisions based on what your goal was. So if you told me that you wanted to downsize in your basement so that you could walk in it, so I want to downsize by 25%, then I would go through those 5 boxes with you and be asking for at least 25%. Can you part with at least 25% of what is in these boxes? Because that's what you told me you wanted to do. Can it be 50%? It depends on, what's more important to you. Is it the sentimentality or is it having the space?
Yeah, those are all good things to be thinking about. So like when you're working with a client and you're helping them with kind of that metacognitive process of going through their stuff, are there certain kinds of questions you teach your clients to be asking themselves as they're going through their stuff?
Well, there are questions that I ask them, and that they start to ask themselves after I've asked them enough times. With things that are given to you, people often, oh, well, that was a gift from Aunt Edna, and I would feel really bad letting it go because I love Aunt Edna, I really do. And so I'll usually ask if Aunt Edna knew that you were paying an organizer to help you simplify your life because disorganization is causing you stress, would she want you to feel guilt and hold on to this item? And 99% of the time, the answer is no.
Absolutely.
99% of the time, the answer is no. Every once in a while, I get a no, really, I have to keep it or else.
Then you refer to a therapist, right?
Or she'll be mad at me, right? But usually people go, yeah, you know what? My loved ones wouldn't want me to feel guilt over a gift. That's kind of the point that we're getting to there. Sometimes with things where there are a lot of a certain type of thing, like clothes, doing friends, acquaintances, and strangers. So can we sort your t-shirts into friends, the ones that you always wear first when they're clean because they're comfortable and they fit you just right and you like the way they look on you? And then the acquaintances might be the ones that you go to because they go well under a specific item, or if all of your friends are dirty or there's some other purpose that you do go to them, just not as often. And then the strangers are the ones that I have no idea when the last time I wore this was. No clue.
Those items that look good in your head, but every time you put it on, you gotta take it off immediately.
Right.
I have at least 4 things in my closet like that right now.
So I make an agreement with my clients when we do that exercise that I will not question your friends. Your friends are yours. I will make no questions, but the strangers are an automatic donate and the acquaintances are up for discussion based on how many friends you kept.
So what if they say that they're all my friends?
Most people won't though. That's it. And it's about finding the exercise that connects with the client so that exercise does not work for all of my clients, but for the ones that do, you can tell that they're really thinking about the parameters that we've set for each category. And it really helps them kind of take that emotional attachment or sometimes that monetary attachment. Oh, I've never worn that sweater, but I spent $75 on it because I thought I'd really love it and it's cashmere and I feel bad, but it's a stranger. So if I say it's a stranger, then I can let it go and it's okay. So yeah, that can sometimes help people kind of work through that emotional and or guilt, monetary attachment, that sort of thing. Because now all we're doing, again, we're just categorize it, right? That's all I'm asking you to do. Just let's make 3 piles and then we'll go from there.
And do you find that people with ADHD have a hard time kind of maybe taking perspective of what categories actually are? So they'll be looking at I'm looking at what's on my desk. I have a couple different colors of sticky notes. And so I'll be like, okay, I have my yellow sticky note pad and I have my green sticky note pad. So I got to have a category for that and that. And it's kind of a loose example, but it's thinking about, okay, wait, these are all sticky notes or these are all things we write with. And as I've caught myself, and I had, I remember when I was doing actually a big kind of organization of my basement a couple of years ago, And I remember thinking, I still work with a lot of kids with autism, but I used to work with younger kids in early intervention, where we would do discrete trial teaching kind of what's the feature, what's the function, what's the class. And for whatever reason, that popped into my mind while going through this organizational kind of project. And I was like, oh my gosh, this helps me so much. I'm like, all right, put it with like items. Like, what are these things? Not like the other, like from like Sesame Street, right? And it's like, what does it have an electric wire? Okay, that's all going to go in one place. Not like phone wires, music wires, and internet wires. Like, they're all wires, right? So I found thinking about it that way, and I think a lot of times it's a cognitive process and going back to the idea of metacognition, of thinking about how we go through these things. So would you say as a professional organizer who is working in ADHD coaching, that part of you kind of have that dual role of helping people get more organized, but then also at the same time helping them think through how this stuff works?
Absolutely. My number one goal as an organizer is to work myself out of a job. So I'm not ever there to tell a client what to do. I'm always there to help them figure out what we need to do for them and then to do it with them together. All of my organizing work is side by side with the client. So that sorting process that you were talking about, the client and I would be working together on what types of categories make sense. And if they're stuck, I might start suggesting things and hearing their responses to that. So, some clients might want to separate computer cords from, say, electrical cords, which is fine, but I might say, can we just have an electronics box? And they might say, oh, well, the computer stuff is different to me. Okay, well, that's okay. Let's do it that way.
And for me in that example, it was sort of an initial organization. And then later I would go through that big box of everything and then organize to functional stuff. But I can't even tell you how many like phone chargers I have.
Well, again, I go back to clothes because it's just a great universal example. And it's one that can vary really widely. So offices are pretty straightforward. If we're going to sort an office, we'll put the paper with the paper, the pens with the pens. We might even just like have a general office supplies box that we deal with later if the office is really chaotic and we just need to get it going. Books with books, that equipment with equipment, computers with computers, etc. Mm-hmm. With clothes, it totally depends on the client, because some people might categorize their clothing by these are my work clothes and these are my home clothes. And some people might categorize by a blouse is different to me than a button-up shirt, than a sweater, and some other people might say it's shirt. It's just a shirt. They're all just shirts to me, Mm-hmm. And one particularly favorite client of mine had 5 categories of T-shirts, and they all were very, very logical for that person. And he had such a great sense of humor about it. And I love that he doesn't mind that I tell this story, because I use this example a lot, because he had, undershirts, right? Shirts that he'd go under other shirts. He had his sports shirts for when he was going to the game, right? The different sports teams he was into. He had comedy shirts, so things that were given to him as kind of a joke that he wouldn't really wear out of the house, but had some sentimental value. There was going to the hardware store shirts. So that was like his grubbing around and on the weekend, doing housework, that kind of thing. And then there were, workout shirts. So 5 distinct categories of T-shirts. But if we would have just lumped them all in as T-shirts, that would not have worked for him, because they have 5 distinct purposes and they ended up with 5 distinct homes.
Makes sense to me.
So, it is about starting broad. You're absolutely right. But it's also about, and you said this yourself, about asking yourself, well, what is this to me? What is this stuff to me? How do I relate to this stuff? So looking at your bookcase, instead of pulling that all down and sorting it just as books, we might sort your books on ADHD versus your textbooks and clinical books that cover more disorders, versus if there's some fiction up there, you might sort it by categories that make sense to you based on how you use them. Mm-hmm. And then we would be able to go through each category and make decisions, maybe perhaps by doing friends, acquaintances, and strangers on... I
just like my books on my bookshelf because it makes me look smart.
I'm noticing your time timer back there too. I have to say, I'm a big time timer fan.
I love time timer. Speaking of time timer, I'm looking at the time.
Yes.
Well, so what we should do, first of all, like I as you're sharing more information, I'm just having more and more questions. But I do want to honor your time. If people have more questions, want to reach out to you, what's the best place that people can reach you?
Sure. So our website is gatewayorganizers.com, and I am on Twitter at gatewayorganize. So feel free to reach out to me through our website contact form, or I do actually have a scheduling tool right on the website if you want to book something and talk to one of our organizers. And then on Twitter, I'm the one that runs that Twitter account of us three. So if you send me a direct message or at me, I will be the one to get that.
Well, Shelly, thank you so much. And I know, like, we could probably do a whole nother show because there was just so much more to get into. But I do want to thank you so much for spending the hour with me. You did awesome. I want you to know that. It was funny because when we in the beginning we kind of had a little bit of a false start just because of an audio issue,
right?
And when I kind of
doing all this.
Right, and I told you too that if there's a weird audio thing, I'll interrupt you, and then I interrupted you in in the first minute, and you're like, "Am I talking too much?" I'm like, "No, you're doing awesome." So Shelly, thank you for sharing everything that you did with us.
It was really fun. It was really, really fun. And if you would be interested in like just occasionally doing this, like I know you just kind of like go with the flow with your shows, like in terms of how it went, but I think it was actually kind of fun to like walk you through some organizing stuff, like as the show. So if you want to like do that again in a different area or, dive down into something, because we kind of went all over the place. We were keeping it pretty broad, but I could see like we started to get into specifics on mail. Like I could see like staying like in a specific area and doing something like that. I would be open to that.
I'm visualizing some webinars in the future.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're actually working on getting that going for ourselves too. So yeah, definitely keep me posted if that's something you want to partner on, because I think it'd be a lot of fun. So, and you're giving me ideas for that podcast I'm going to start someday.
Well, now that you're doing like two businesses, and you'll get there. Right?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it would be part of the Gateway Organizers business, like that would be part of because I do coach. So, I don't need to physically be present to work with people. So it would be a growth tactic. And I'll probably want to pick your brain at some point about your coaching groups and how that works. Because that's something from an organizing and productivity perspective that I'm interested in doing too, is doing some group stuff to kind of make it more affordable for people who can't dive into one-on-one or can't hire a hands-on organizer, because it's definitely extremely cost prohibitive. And unlike therapy, it's not something that's you have to pay out of pocket. So, it's just support that's out of reach for a lot of people. So I'd love to figure out some ways that we can get it in the hands of more people, and also so that the three of us aren't always selling our time per hour, which you totally understand because you've done the same thing,
Yep.
So I could see a podcast being a great tool to get us there at some point. But right now we're still just figuring out how we're going to run the day to day. It's all new for all of us. So
everything has its season, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, well, thank you so much. This was really fun. And like I said, if you want to circle back around and do it again, I would love to. So
awesome. Shelly, thank you so much for helping our listeners get their ADHD rewired. If starting is the hardest part, finishing is a close contender. And here we are at the final stretch. And if you're new to the show, welcome to ADHD Rewired. We are more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. You could see a full outline of this and all other episodes with all the links and resources mentioned on today's show at ADHDrewired.com. As always, there are a number of ways you can support this podcast. Make it a mission to tell at least one person this week about the podcast. And if you're with them in person, ask them for their phone and subscribe to the podcast for them right there. If you haven't done so already, please go to iTunes or Stitcher and leave an honest rating and review. Yes, it makes a huge difference. Set a reminder so you don't forget. You think I'm kidding? I know some of you have been listening for 2 years. Yes, this podcast is just about coming up on its 2-year anniversary. And you still haven't left a review. Seriously? Come on, send me some 5-star love. And thank you. You can also help support this podcast by checking out my sponsors. I use Zoom video conferencing every day, and so can you. Go free or go pro, but please go to erictivers.com/Zoom so they know that I sent you. And get a free audiobook from Audible at audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. And next time you shop Amazon, use the Amazon search portal at my website. A small percentage of your purchase will go to support this show, and it doesn't cost you any extra. Get a jump start on your summer productivity. Our coaching and accountability group begins May 16th. These groups sell out fast. Go to coachingrewired.com for more information and to schedule your free screening call with me today. Do you know that I give talks and all-day workshops? If your school, business, organization, or conference planning committee is looking to hire that person to give an incredible, educational, inspirational talk on ADHD, then look no further than erictivers.com. Click on Talks at the top of the page. Don't just be a passive listener. Become an active member of the ADHD Rewired community. We're on Facebook. You can like our page, but submit your request to join our free and growing community. Watch for a message from me on Facebook because I screen everyone before they come into the group. Production support for this podcast comes from the master of mediocrity himself, Tom Nardone. Go to tomnardone.net to check out his blog, podcast, and to get a copy of his awesome personal memoir, Chasing Kites. Hey, Tom, do you have anything to add? Until next time.